Due to government advice to practice social distancing will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking. Chat button has been disabled for this meeting, as it is for every meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting.
Thank you, Leader. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Officer. Joining me on the meeting this afternoon is my colleague Michael Pittman, who is monitoring the cameras and the sound. Members in attendance are Councillor Hugh David, Leader, Deputy Leader Councillor Howell Williams, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Cabinet Member, Social Services and Early Help, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, Cabinet Member, Communities, Councillor Charles Smith, Cabinet Member, Education and Regeneration.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Leader.
I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. The first item is to receive any apologies for absence.
Yes, Leader. The only apologies I am aware of are from Claire Marchant, Corporate Director, Social Services and Wellbeing. Jackie Davis, who is Head of Adult Social Care, is attending on her behalf. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I know that we've also received apologies from the Chief Executive too. I can see that Councillor Baldwin would like to speak. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, Councillor Danisha Patel has been at the vaccination centre earlier, so she is on her way back for this meeting, but she is expected to be a little late. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Baldwin. So all of the Cabinet members are present. And therefore, we will now receive declarations of interest of a personal or prejudicial interest, if any, from members and officers in accordance with the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by the authority in September 2008. Are there any declarations of interest, please, from members? Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I've got a long-standing personal declaration of interest as a co-parent of a child with complex needs, going through the transition process, and is also in receipt of home to school transport.
And so that's a declaration of a personal interest on item 10, isn't it? Okay. Thank you. If there are no other declarations of interest. We will now receive for approval the minutes of the Cabinet meetings held on the 18th of May and the 22nd of June. Do I have a mover, please?
Move.
And a seconder?
Second.
All agreed? They're true and accurate record of
Agreed.
Thank you. We will now receive the first report to the meeting of Cabinet. And the first report is from the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and it is on the budget monitoring 2021 to 2022 Q1 revenue forecast. Jill, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. The purpose of the report in front of you this afternoon is the budget monitoring report for Q1 of 21-22, the revenue forecast. And the purpose of this report is to provide Cabinet with an update on the Council's revenue financial position as at the 30th of June. This is a report that you'll be well used to receiving at Cabinet, and I'll take you briefly through the key points. So just to remind Cabinet, Council approved a net revenue budget at the 24th of February of 299 million. And this is the first report of progress against that budget. Table 1 sets out the position, the projected position, which, as you will see, is showing a projected overspend of 900k, nearly a million. Now, that is in quite stark contrast to the outturn report that you will have received recently for 2021, and I think reflects very much the introduction that I made when I delivered the outturn report, which showed some significant year-end volatility. And I think I said at the time to Cabinet that there was likely to be some underlying deficit positions and also pressures. And it's really that point that I'd like to emphasise today. This Q1 report very much shows that underlying some of our position is some significant difficulties with continuing to meet our targets. So the position, as you see it in 4.12, includes money that we've received from the Welsh Government, but not any money that's currently on hold in the hardship fund. It would be inappropriate, obviously, to anticipate that we would get that. Some COVID spend won't be incurred until quarters 2 and 4, so obviously that wouldn't be included in Q1. There's nothing in here for loss of income and support, which you'll recall is something that we also are able to claim from the hardship fund, as again that has not been confirmed. And so the position is inclusive of all those issues. So we're going to continue to claim against the hardship fund. We claimed 20 million last year, which is a huge amount, obviously, of money. But I have to say that at this point in time, whilst the hardship fund is available for us to claim both additional costs and loss of income, the Welsh Government are very much expecting these to taper off as we come out of COVID and into recovery, and are therefore able to assume the previous levels of service. So we will be expected to regain the levels of income that we had prior to COVID and to start to reduce our costs in many areas. Adult social care will continue to be assisted, but again, there's an expectation that that will taper as well. We established the 1 million COVID recovery fund, as members will recall, and that's been used obviously for a phased car parking offer, phased rental income for BCBC rental properties, waiver of sports fees for 2021, and summer play. None of those are claimable against the hardship fund, as those are local decisions, but that was the purpose, obviously, of us setting aside as a COVID recovery fund. Table 2 of the report sets out our expenditure claims for Q1 for 21-22, and as you can see, we have £2 million worth that's actually on hold at the moment, pending review. There's nothing in the projections, as I said, for loss of income. The claim's not due until the 23rd of July, at which point we will know how much will be available to us and how much we're expected now to have tapered and to recovered some of our services. The pressure on council tax and council tax recovery continues, with financial hardship across the borough and obviously furlough coming to an end. And just to remind Cabinet, just a 1% reduction in the amount of council tax collected is £1 million of loss of revenue for us as a council. We haven't yet been given any indication about whether we will have support from the Welsh Government on council tax for this year. We obviously had support last year. At 4.1.13, you'll see that there's quite a lot of volatility, certainly in terms of inflation, and both pay and prices will remain volatile for the foreseeable future. And we obviously don't know as yet what the likely wage increase will be and the offer for local governments in the coming year. So the budgets are always set assuming full implementation of savings proposals. Table 3 sets out the prior year savings achievement and shortfall, which is quite a good story. We're within 310,000, that's the shortfall on our prior year savings proposals, which is a significant achievement. And table 4, I should say the detail is in Appendix 1 of those. Table 4 and Appendix 2 shows this year's performance, and again, significant achievements really, given the difficult year that everybody's endured. And that shows that all but one of the savings proposals is likely to be achieved, and the only remaining one is the recycling centre, as you'll see at 425. That will be achieved, but there were delays because of COVID, and therefore it's only a part year delivery on the savings. So a really good achievement on our savings proposals. However, we continue to need savings over the life of the MTFS from 22-23 to 25-26. You will have heard me talk about the levels of savings likely to be needed and the assumptions that we've built into any estimates. And the most likely scenario is that a further 22 million could be needed over the 4-year period. From 4.3 onwards, there's a commentary on the financial position in detail over each of the directorates. And I wasn't proposing to go into those in any detail, Leader. Happy to take any questions, as I'm sure my colleagues will be as well. So I take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Thanks very much, Jill, for that comprehensive report. I can see that Councillor Baldwin has indicated, so I'll bring him in first, then Councillor Burnett, and then the Deputy Leader. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And for the purpose of the recording, and for guests that are here, I'm Councillor Stuart Baldwin, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Communities. Thank you, Jill, for this report, and I just want to take you back to the table 4.17 and table 2 in relation to the claims and the on hold pending review. And I just want to talk about the homelessness situation, and they're very, very grateful for the money that we have received to support the increased responsibilities and duties that we have as an organisation. I also noticed from Welsh Government's programme for government around the review of homelessness and the rapid rehousing, but then also picked up on your words of tapered, which to me means reduced or cuts, and also in relation to your when you've said about the savings that are required up until 2026, which to me again just means more cuts. So it's difficult, and I appreciate that that is the language that we use in relation to savings, but I just need to make sure for other people that are listening, these are not something that savings to me means something that we would like to do. These are not things that we necessarily like to do. These are things that we're going to be expected to do to be able to provide a balanced budget, which is required by us required from us by law. Can you help me and perhaps others understand, Jill, what the current situation is with the funding we received from homelessness and what is on hold there, and how that taper is going to impact on us as an authority with the increased expectations of the services that we will need to continue to provide for our homelessness population? And I hate to use the word population, but we are starting to see people sleeping on streets. Again, after this pandemic, the responsibility to help those hasn't gone away, and the priority from Welsh Government is still there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Jill, can you respond to those important points and questions, please?
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Baldwin. I think you've articulated very, very well the issues that are facing the council. None of us ever want to see people sleeping on the street. Homelessness has been a problem for many, many years. And the Welsh Government brought in new guidelines, as I'm sure Cabinet will recall last year, to try and end homelessness. They brought in 2 sets of guidelines, and in particular, during the COVID pandemic, there was an expectation that we would make sure that everybody had some sort of accommodation. And we obviously worked very, very hard to make sure that that happened, which we did do. We've got a growing problem. We've probably got round about 200 either families or individuals in temporary accommodation, which we're going to have to find medium and long-term solutions to. And as the COVID pandemic becomes over and recovery is expected and taper is expected, that's going to be a huge resource intensive piece of work, and a very sensitive piece of work, I think, for the council to have to undertake. We have been successful in getting those costs where we've had to put up families and individuals in hotels, as have many other local authorities across the country. But obviously, as those costs are not funded, then we will have significant pressures on our council budgets. And I don't think there's any way really of escaping that fact at the moment. So we're hopeful that the claim for the first quarter will be paid, hopefully in full, but at the very least in part. We then have a second quarter, and then we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you for that, Jill. And could you give an indication of the scale of that homelessness problem and the number of families that we have already supported, we've already rehoused, and we continue to need to support even now?
Yes, at the moment we run obviously a weekly running total, and it's been between about 170 and 200, probably consistently for the last year virtually. Sometimes it goes a little bit above, sometimes, and there's a constant stream, so it's not the same necessarily. There are obviously new presentations, new duties to be fulfilled, and we have been successful through the rapid rehousing protocol, through all sorts of measures of getting many people into much more long-term solutions and better accommodation, but we're not breaking the back of it. We've got a consistent number, and that's multi-million-pound pressure. And unfortunately, we haven't got the ready stock in terms of accommodation available, and certainly not available in necessarily where everybody would prefer. So it is going to become one of the big issues for the council.
It is, even though we are developing as we speak with our partners, registered social landlords, accommodation throughout the county borough. We need to try and increase the pace of that. So we appreciate that isn't always welcomed, is it, by people? Thank you. Jill, Councillor Burnett is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. So I'm Councillor Burnett. I am Cabinet Member for Social Services and Early Help. I just wanted to highlight the many underspends which have been made obvious within the report, and to make sure that they are interpreted appropriately, and that in no way can they be considered to be a positive or a saving or a potential future saving. Each of those underspends equates not to a saving, but reflects a lack of capacity within our system and vacancies of very important staffing roles which we have been unable to fill. And I'm very aware within my own directorate what a negative impact this has on existing staff and the pressures that this will equate to in the future. So I would just like further clarity on that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an important point, Councillor Burnett. I will invite the Chief Officer for Legal, Human Resources and Regulatory Services to respond to that point and that question. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's as Councillor Burnett has pointed out, these are not savings. Where we have got vacancies within the authority, we are trying to recruit. But as Councillor Burnett has pointed out, failure to recruit doesn't lead to a saving because it just puts extra pressure on the people who are still in the team. So all managers are doing their best. We're trying to be innovative with the ways we recruit in. We're looking at different opportunities. We're looking at apprentices and graduates. various schemes to try to plug those gaps. You know, we're trying to look at non-traditional methods of recruitment, so we're going out to different job fairs and things, so we're not just putting an advert in the local paper. But I think the important point is, as Councillor Burnett says, these are not vacancies we can just cut from the structure, because that does leave all other members of staff then doing the work of the people who are missing from the structure.
Thank you for that, Kelly. And obviously, we are constantly seeking to recruit, in particular at the moment, recruit to social care, to help support people at home, to help support people in residential settings. And so we would encourage anyone who's interested, or perhaps used to serve the community in that sector, to consider returning to it, because we are short-staffed and we are looking to recruit, and that is the same for a number of very important services within the council. Deputy Leader is next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Councillor Howell Williams, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Resources. Can I start by moving the recommendation at 9.1? And I think it was Harold Wilson who said a week is a very long time in politics. Well, from the minutes we've approved this earlier, we had a healthy underspend, and now Q1 we are obviously a pinch of reality. And that reality is that we were reliant on the lifeline from Welsh Government through the Hardship Fund. And we're still suffering the effects of COVID, because, you know, some of the underspends and the overspends are still COVID related. So, hello, am I still there? Are still COVID related. So, so I think this report demonstrates the impact that 10 years of austerity has had on local government. You know, you cannot take £70 million away from Bridgend County Borough Council and its residents and expect that to have no impact on the delivery of service. So just two specific points then, as I mentioned, the adult learning budget, that is severely underspent. So could I have please an idea of how we're going to, or is there any initiatives on how we're going to deliver the adult learning to those residents of the county borough that will be looking to take up that service, and also the impact that of COVID have had on the fleet services. That is showing a significant overspend. So that's just those 2 points. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader, and I will ask the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support to address that question about adult community learning. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks for the question, Deputy Leader. You're right, adult community learning is an important service that we provide, and it has been difficult this year on a number of fronts to recruit suitably qualified and experienced staff to the service. So I suppose there's been 3 areas that have related to the underspend. First of all is vacancies. We haven't been able to fill some places, even though we've tried really hard to do so. Secondly, we've had increased levels of grant from Welsh Government, which obviously we warmly receive. And thirdly, because of the pandemic, we've had to do things differently. So, for example, we've conducted some courses online and delivered them differently. And of course, that's mitigated some of the venue higher costs. But again, as the important point that was made earlier, we still seek to fill these important places to make sure the offer is as good as possible for the citizens of Bridgend.
Okay, thank you for that, Lindsay. Does that answer your question, Deputy Leader?
Yes, thank you for that response, Lindsay, and I hope that the fact that we've highlighted this issue this afternoon, if anyone has the relevant skills, you know, we are open to employing people. So you know, let's use this opportunity to try and promote those vacancies.
course. Okay, well, the Deputy Leader has moved the recommendations in the report. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations, please?
I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. And is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Okay. And we will, of course, continue to make representations, either directly or through the Welsh Local Government Association, about the importance of the hardship fund and the need for the funding to continue into the future. Because whilst there has been some lifting of restrictions, increasingly the reports are that we will face further pressures in the coming months, sadly, as a result of the pandemic, and the financial pressures will not go away, and we need to make sure that those pressures are fully funded by Welsh Government. And of course, we recognise that Welsh Government are dependent upon funding from the UK Government. So the second report that we have today from the Interim Chief Finance Officer for Performance Change is on the capital programme outturn and the Q1 update report 2021-2022. Jill, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis. I'm the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. The report that you have in front of you this afternoon is a slightly unusual report because it's two reports in one. So you've got the capital programme outturn for 2021 and the Q1 update report for 21-22. And the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the outturn for 2021. And that's set out in Appendix A, to provide an update on the capital position for 21-22 at the first quarter at the 30th of June at Appendix B, to seek agreement from Cabinet to present a report to Council for approval for a revised capital programme for 21-22 to 2030-31, because it's a 10-year capital programme. At Appendix C, and to note the projected prudential and other indicators for 21-22, which are shown at Appendix D. So you'll be familiar with the background to the capital programme, and on the 26th of February 2020, because this is the outturn part of the report, the Council approved a capital budget of 56.5 million for 2021 as part of a capital programme covering the period 2021 to 29-30. Now that programme was last updated and approved by Council on the 23rd of June 2021. So this report is providing you with an update on the outturn for last year, the capital programme for Q1, the revised capital programme for 21-22 to 2030-31, capital strategy monitoring and the prudential and other indicators. So if I turn to the outturn, and you will see at 4.1, the 2021 budget was revised and approved during the year. You'll have been familiar with the update reports that come forward to Council fairly regularly on the capital programme. And the budget that was revised and approved during the year brought forward any schemes from 1920 and any new schemes and approvals. And so the capital programme that was approved in February 21 totalled 35.5 million. 12 million from BCBC funding and 23 million from external funding. Just to remind Cabinet, we do secure significant sums for our capital programme from external sources, grants and other, and the rest is provided by the Council. So Appendix A gives you all the detail on each of the individual schemes, and the revised programme was approved in February 21, so there have been very few changes since then. There's been some new approvals of £3 million, mainly from grant schemes, school maintenance being a big one of those, the East Hub, green recovery and the circular economy, to name but a few. There was a £300,000 budget brought back from 21-22, which gave a revised budget of 38 million. Against that, there was a total expenditure of 23 million with slippage and adjustments of 15 million, giving a net underspend of 139,000, which has been taken to council funding. I think there's always some confusion about the slippage and the underspend. Slippage means that the scheme has either been delayed or hasn't yet commenced and moved forward. So it isn't an underspend against the capital programme. And I think it's really important to remember that there's still a commitment to the scheme. It's only when the scheme is completely removed that the capital programme would change. So as you can imagine, Cabinet, many schemes did commence but weren't completed. And some of those indeed have been wholly moved into 21-22 because of the impact of COVID. Everywhere the capital programme, major works, it goes without saying, has been affected by the pandemic. The schemes affected by slippage are set out in 414. And I wasn't going to go through those in any detail, but I'm sure that we'd be happy to answer questions on those. So if I then take you to 4.2 and go through the capital programme Q1 update. So the capital programme for 21-22 to 30-31 totals 87 million. 53 million BCBC and 34 million from external resources. And Table 1 sets out the programme by directorate. Table 2 sets out the funding for those capital schemes, the resources that we have available to fund them. And Appendix B gives you the detail on each of the schemes. At 424, you'll see that there are a number of amendments to the capital programme for 21-22 that I wanted to draw your attention to. I wasn't going to go through them in detail. They are listed there and there are quite a few of them, and those are all amendments to the capital programme. The revised capital programme, taking into account all these changes, is set out in Appendix C. 4.3 onwards sets out the monitoring of the prudential and other indicators, and Appendix D details those indicators and shows that the Council is operating within our approved limits that we set. 4.4 details the monitoring of the non-treasury management investments and other long-term liabilities. So I wasn't proposing to go into any more detail, Leader. I'll take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Okay, thank you for that, Jill. Again, there's a lot of activity that's being reported on, and some good news, lots of good news, in fact, about funding that we have secured from other organisations to invest in infrastructure across Bridgend County Borough. I will bring the Deputy Leader in, and then Councillor Baldwin in. Councillor Williams first, then, please.
Thank you, Leader. And if I begin by moving the recommendation at 9.1, and I welcome the report. It's a 10-year programme, as set out in Appendix C. Details £195 million worth of spend across the county borough. And I'm pleased to see that 90 million of that will be spent improving the county borough through various schemes to make Bridgend County Borough a good place to live, work and visit. So I'm happy to move the report, Leader. And I certainly welcome the additional schemes that will help us meet our objectives on the 2030 carbon agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting schemes that are so important to that work. I'll bring Councillor Baldwin in next. Perhaps he'll be referring to those schemes as well, because we spoke at length yesterday, didn't we, in a overview and scrutiny committee meeting about our agenda to respond to the climate emergency that we're experiencing. And there's some excellent examples here of action we're taking in the here and now to do our bit as a county borough. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And yes, and I won't go through the plethora of schemes that are in there in relation to 2030, but just highlight the importance in relation to achieving our net zero targets in that timescale. And as the Deputy Leader has already moved it, I will quite happily second the report. But I would just like to highlight the 2.85 million that has been brought in relation to active travel, and the commitment from Welsh Government to actually help us achieve the 2030 agenda, but also improve the physical health and well-being of people on our active travel routes, and in its aim to remove cars and pollution from our roads. So I really do welcome that level. And while a lot of people will question why we are building cycle routes and active travel routes, it is important to recognise that not everybody does have a car, and that not everybody chooses to use a car for shorter journeys, and we need to make sure that we are protecting and making safe those routes for people to traverse around our county. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. A point well made. Particularly as this week work is starting on the latest phase of our active travel route between Pencoed and Bridgend, and completing the latest phase of that. I'm also pleased to see in there that we received funding for the Pyle to Porthcawl active travel route phase 1. And I also wanted, because people may not be familiar with the terminology, I wanted to ask you, Jill, about the Enable grant and the impact that grant has on some of the most vulnerable people in Bridgend, because obviously it's not a term that everyone will be familiar with. But I know it's a very important source of funding for us. Jill, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, this is a grant that is given to us by the Welsh Government, and it's basically for small scales adaptations for people to enable people to stay at home. So it's very much used for a very quick turnaround to make sure that people can live in their own home, be independent, and enjoy a full quality of life. So, a considerable number of people have been facilitated from discharge from hospital using this grant, and all sorts of other examples. So it's small scale adaptations, grab rails, small adaptations in the house, ramps to make sure that they can be discharged from hospital and live independently. So we are hoping that this grant will be increased. There's an indication that we should get more funding, and obviously we work very closely with social services and wellbeing as you know, colleagues, to make sure that all those people who come out from hospital can live independently.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's a really important initiative, and £198,000 very well spent in my view. And can I ask the Corporate Director for Communities about the nearly £1 million of Welsh Government funding that we've received for resilient roads and ultra low emission vehicle initiatives. Obviously, the ultra low emission vehicles initiative speaks for itself, and we're really excited about the level of investment that we are seeing in that infrastructure to support the shift to electric vehicles. But again, Resilient Roads Fund may not be a scheme that that members of the public listening to this meeting will be familiar with, but I know it's good news, and I just ask Janine to explain a little more about how that funding will be put to good use across Bridgend County Borough. Thank you, Janine.
No problem. Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, and I'm the Corporate Director for Communities here in Bridgend. Yes, the Resilient Roads Fund, we've had nearly £500,000 awarded from Welsh Government, Leader, for this. And what this is in particular is to target roads that we know have become problematic and disintegrate because of flooding and challenging weather events. So it's specifically for those areas. We have road maintenance grants which cover our general roads, but we all know without and throughout our borough we have particular roads that are near rivers, etc., which are prone to flooding, and this is to ensure that we can put some more robust road coverage in, that we can build retaining walls, and we can look after those roads in a better way, that we can look at engineering solutions, and as we say, make them more resilient, literally, to weather conditions as we go forward. Our winters seem to be becoming a little bit more severe with our climate changing. We are unfortunately getting more flooding, more heavy rainfall episodes. So this money, this £500,000, is going to be used specifically to target those areas in the borough where we know we have issues, and see if we can mitigate them and literally make those roads more resilient in the future. So I hope that it provides a little bit of explanation. So it's over and above our normal road funding, Leader.
It's a very full explanation. Thank you for that, Janine. And I know that we'll shortly be publicising how we'll be investing that funding across the borough. And then secondly, I wanted to ask, and I know we'll also be sharing details of this shortly, but I wanted members of the public to know that we've had £2.42 million school maintenance capital maintenance grant from Welsh Government. That's excellent news, and we'll be looking to see how that can be invested in schools across the borough. And of course, we will use a needs-based prioritisation criteria for targeting that funding, and I'm sure every penny will be very well spent in investing in our schools.
Yeah, absolutely, Leader. I mean, something we're aiming to do is to look at the condition we have condition surveys of all our schools, and we'll be prioritising funding in that way. But we want to go one step further to ensure that we get best value. So, for instance, if we are going to be repairing roofs, the one thing we want to do is to put all the roofs together in one tender and go out in one place, rather than tender roofs individually, because when you go out, you get much more value for money. And what we want to look at is more efficiency with procuring and undertaking this work for our schools estate. And that way, Leader, we get the maximum use of the money that's available. But absolutely, having a school estate that's fit for purpose, as the Director of Education knows, it is one of the critical parts. No building, no school. So that's the one thing that we is very much the top of our priority list, Leader.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Janine. Well, the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations? And of course, we will be discussing them, I'm sure, in more detail once again tomorrow at full council.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. The next report on today's agenda is a report of the Chief Executive, and it's on the review of the corporate plan targets for 2021 to 2022 following the impact of COVID. And I'm going to ask the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change to present this report, please. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. The report that you have in front of you this afternoon is the review of the corporate plan targets for 21-22 following the impact of COVID-19. And the purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet endorsement of the proposed changes to the corporate plan targets for 21-22 as outlined in Appendix A prior to submission to Council for approval tomorrow. So the corporate plan was refreshed in February 2021 and signed off by Cabinet and approved by Council in line with the normal statutory requirements to review the corporate plan annually. COVID-19 and the pandemic has obviously had an impact on the delivery of many of our services. But it's had a particular impact, obviously, on the planning cycle, making it much more challenging to set targets for 21-22. And I know that we've given examples of these before, where we might have had targets for things like footfall in the town centre and all sorts of different things that we just weren't, first of all, weren't able to measure, but secondly, it would have been non-productive to measure because the pandemic rendered some of those targets not relevant for that year. So we realised that obviously we had to be much more flexible about setting targets once a year and measuring them once a year. Well, we don't measure them once a year, obviously we measure them going through the year. But as part of the approval process for the refreshed corporate plan, we thought that a more flexible approach to setting corporate plan targets was necessary to ensure that our business planning was robust and effective. So, we have taken a fresh look at each of the directorates. Everybody's had an opportunity to consider targets for 21-22 based on the verified year-end data. And just to explain that in a little bit more detail, we normally set obviously the targets in the corporate plan that's approved quite properly before the year end, along with the budget at the council in either the end of February, beginning of March, that time period. That doesn't actually give the data for the year in question. So if we approved the budget and the corporate plan in February 21, we wouldn't have had the 2021 data. If we do a refresh, as we have done with this corporate plan, we do have the year-end data, and therefore it enables us to be much more accurate about our expectations going forward. So the proposed changes to the targets have been considered at COSC at the meeting on the 5th of July, obviously to ensure appropriate challenge and transparency. So as part of the wider review of performance and governance that we are now undertaking in earnest due to the Local Government and Elections Act of 2021, we're proposing that the corporate planning adopts this approach to target setting in future planning cycles, and that will ensure that the published corporate plan remains up to date with the most recent year-end data, as I've just alluded to. So Appendix A sets out the proposed target changes and, subject to being approved, will be published as an addendum to the current corporate plan. So that's all I wanted to say today, Leader. I'll take you to the recommendations at 9.1 and 9.2.
Okay, thanks very much for that report, Jill, and for the work that has been undertaken on the indicators. It is important that we make every effort to measure our progress against objectives, but it is particularly difficult during a pandemic, and we are still dealing with that public health emergency, and I know that that has been obviously reflected in the changes to some of the targets. I can see that Councillor Patel and Councillor Baldwin would like to come in. So first of all, can I warmly welcome Councillor Patel to the meeting. I hope your appointment was successful and you're feeling well, and thank you very much for joining the meeting. That shows your commitment, Councillor Patel.
No, I could have cried it off, but I didn't. Shout out to my nurse, Alana. She did a really good job. I didn't even feel it going. So yeah. But thank you, Leader. And I did catch the end of the previous item as well. But on this report, first of all, thanks, Jill. And I totally agree with what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring revised targets. And so I'd like to second the I'd like to propose the recommendations, and then I'd like to draw colleagues' attention to the homelessness piece, which is, or the figures on page 94 of the pack. So the two red boxes, well, the red box after the yellow box, but I just wanted to say that last year's figures, 50.4% being the actual percentage of people that presented homeless or were sofa surfers, and we had a legal duty to. The figure sounds horrific, and it is horrific, but it's because the duty basically got expanded, and therefore we've had to capture more people under this item than we would, and So I just think that for me it pops out. You know, we were doing 10% prior to the pandemic, and then all of a sudden we've jumped to 50%. So I just wanted to say that is in relation to the pandemic and the change of the categorization in terms of who we owe a duty to, and I'm looking forward now to the next year's target and seeing that adjustment to 30%. So I think we've got quite a long way to go in order to bring it back into line with the 2019-2020 figures that we were looking at. But I just wanted to reassure colleagues that it is something that we are dealing with. I don't know if the director wants to come in and add any more onto that. But I've also got a second point as well in relation to the empty properties. But I don't know if you want to bring Jill in first.
I will bring Jill in first, because it is one of those indicators, and there are several indicators in the appendix that on the face of it may look like there's been a short come in performance, but actually it's because the way that we measure that indicator, the way that indicator has been reported and is being reported has changed. Jill, did you want to add to that?
No, I don't think I've got too much to add to that, Councillor Patel. We did have a brief discussion on homelessness as part of the Q1 revenue report, where I explained in some detail the challenge facing us, which you and I both know is not going to be easy. So I have outlined the numbers that we're tackling and the resource issue that faces us. So thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
Thank you, Jill. And Councillor Patel, you're the second.
Yeah, so just on the point underneath that about the number of dwellings that we've brought back into use, and again, that's something I wanted to reassure colleagues with. We were looking at 20 properties that we brought back into use in the year 2019-2020, and that was pre-pandemic, and we only managed to get 2 through during the pandemic, which I think is actually quite an achievement considering the challenges and the resource challenges. You know, it wasn't a priority. Staff were working on TTP, they were working on, you know, COVID related issues, getting children out, getting meals out to children. You know, there was a whole lot of other things that was going on in the borough, and I think this to get 2 through is still an achievement, because, you know, one property in one neighbourhood, one street can make you know, that area's lives a misery, and so I think having 2 is a decent performance for during the pandemic. And I can see that we've put the target in for 7, and to be honest, looking around the borough, I think properties are being snapped up, so it might be higher than that by the end of the year. So I just wanted to reassure colleagues that we committed to working on empty properties, and we are still doing that.
That is reassuring, and we've seen the impact of many of those grants, and we'll see the impact of grants that have been awarded in the last couple of months. We won't see the impact immediately, but it is coming through the system, isn't it? These properties aren't brought back into life overnight. Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. Next is Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I just want to applaud the work of the team. It's not a big team when it comes to empty properties either. And just to say that empty properties are empty for many reasons, often more than just the fact that somebody's hoping to achieve financial gain from them, and they sit empty for issues around emotional and loss of family, and also just absent people have inherited properties and not knowing what to do with them. So it is a very complex issue. So even achieving that is is really important. And let's not forget that it's this administration that removed the 50% discount on empty properties as well, to make sure to encourage people to bring their empty properties back into use. My questions, though, Leader, are I just want to around the number of vacant premises within the town centre, and can see that we're being judged in relation to red figures on something that is, while it's in the behest of us as a local authority, these are not properties that are owned by the local authority, and just think that it's important that we point out that at some point that we are being they're a performance indicator for us to measure the level of empty properties across our town centres without actually owning properties within the town centres, and just to place on record the difficulty of again, we've just heard about dealing with empty properties from a residential point of view. These are often properties that are owned by pension funds outside of the UK or even outside of Europe, with solicitors that falling over themselves to maybe leave them empty in some instances. So I just think it's important that we have that on record. The other thing that I want to pick up in that report is around the community asset transfers, and I will take that's down to page 94. I think it's a little disappointing that it's in red, but I want to invite the corporate director to maybe just give an explanation around why that's a red, considering the target was 15, and during the year we've achieved 13, and I'd like to understand how capacity might have impacted on that as well, if possible, please, Janine.
Certainly, thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. Janine, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. I've got a comment to make on the vacant properties as well, if I may, Leader, but I'll go through the CAT piece first. Before the pandemic, we set a target for community asset transfer of 15 properties during the year. And I think it's absolutely remarkable, dare I say, that during the pandemic and during COVID, we actually managed to deliver 13 community asset transfers. And all credit goes to Guy Smith and the team for being able to achieve that during the pandemic. About 6 or 7 of them were bowls clubs, and the rest were athletic clubs, etc. And this is not to be snuffed at, because there's an awful lot of due diligence that goes behind this. So the team have done tremendously well. Now, the reason it's shown as red is that if you have anything as a deviation more than 10%, you get a red, I'm afraid, and 10% is 1.5, and of course we missed our target by 2. But just the fact that we managed to do 13 community asset transfers set against the backdrop of COVID, I think is remarkable, and I don't think that reflects the performance of the team at all. But what we want to do, we've got a lot of ambition with regards to this. We've got a lot of interest as well across the borough. So what we are doing is we are recruiting to increase the amount of people in the team, because to say it's a one-man band is an underestimate. It has been for some time. And he works very, very hard, Guy Smith, and has got a very good relationship actually with clubs. When you speak to clubs, he's very credible, a very professional officer. So what we are doing is trying to recruit to some more posts to assist him, and hopefully in the next year we can get another 10 community asset transfers across the line, and that's something we would be thrilled to be able to achieve. Now, with regard, if I may, to the vacant properties in town centres, you're absolutely right, Councillor Baldwin. The majority of these are owned by private individuals, and it is incredibly difficult, isn't it, to encourage them to bring properties back into use, especially when investment companies own them and not even based in the borough. Some companies own buildings and based in London, etc. Now, what we're currently doing is benchmarking what we've got as a result of the pandemic, because we know the pandemic has been very difficult on some retail sectors, town centre in particular. Not so much for food retail, people still go food shopping, but we know that a lot of movement has moved online. Now, we have our master plan for Bridgend, we've got that brought forward, and we've got also COVID recovery plans for Maesteg, Porthcawl, Pencode, where we're looking at having a range of uses in the town centre to encourage people to come in, not just about retail shopping and servicing. We're seeing whether we can put some employment uses back in, whether we can have some cultural uses, whether we can have people living in the town centres. And we know that our town centres need a much different focus now. But just to highlight some of the things that we're doing, because it's set against a very tough background. And we're not the only local authority in Wales that, or in the UK, who has this background. No, this is common. We need to look to revive our town centres. So what we are doing is working very hard with the RSLs, the housing associations. We're looking at schemes with Welsh Government where we can put a ground floor use, be it retail or workspaces or cultural spaces with residential above. And we've done that very successful scheme in Bridgend with the Rue car park. And that's the type of thing that we want to try and encourage more of that in town centres. Another example is where we offer commercial grants out from the Welsh Government's Transforming Towns agenda. And the one that we've got on site currently is Family Value in Maesteg, for those who on the call who know that. Now, Family Value has been a very large unit and been vacant for a significant amount of time, and now we've offered a £250,000 grant to Family Value, and the work is on site now, and they're bringing that back into use as a commercial space on the ground floor and some residential units above. We're really pleased about that. But we've also given grants out all the way during the pandemic for commercial improvements, in terms of outdoor seating and patios and that type of thing, so people can continue to trade during the pandemic, and that's been important as well. So we are set against a very tough background, and those numbers, I'm not sure, whilst we can do everything in our gift, I'm not sure how we can really have a big impact on those numbers, because as our cabinet member has said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, I'm afraid. We do offer monetary incentives and financial incentives to some owners, and I'm afraid they don't want them, and they don't want to sell property either. But we will continue to work as hard as we can, implementing our master plan and our recovery to see if we can improve our town centres. So I hope that adds some narrative.
Thank you, Jane. Leader, do you mind if I come back, or not come back on any of those things, but I've got one other question in relation to budget reduction, percentage budget reduction achieved overall for the BCBC budget, which is on page 95. And we can see that it's an 85.8% actual achieved in 2021 against a target of 100%. And again, I suppose it's just to have some sort of reassurance from from Jill around that target and the way we are going to be judged necessarily, and how people will view our actions in relation to that target. But I just want to understand maybe why we're at that level and why we're not achieving those 100% targets, or is the fact that we're setting the 100% targets on those reductions actually even achievable considering the restricted budget position that we're in?
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. Jill, did you want to respond to that question?
Yes, thank you, Leader. If I may, all our budgets are set with the assumption, Councillor Baldwin, that we will achieve 100% of our savings, and that is something that our external auditors will look for when we set our budget. We've had a number of pieces of work in the past that have both given us recommendations and complimented us, I think, in equal measures in terms of our savings proposals. And the one thing that just when I came into the council, they had said was that we didn't have sufficient detail around some of our savings proposals. And so we've worked very hard over the last 3 to 4 years to make sure that nothing is put forward that isn't firstly thought through, detailed and pretty much achievable. Now, some will be incredibly difficult to achieve, and sometimes things change during the year. And the one that I referred to earlier was the recycling centre, where we clearly couldn't implement to start the beginning of the financial year, and therefore only half of that saving will be achieved. Well, that will contribute to a percentage drop from the 100%. So there's inevitably going to be some that are much more difficult to achieve than others. You could argue that we put forward more than we need, but I think we're struggling very hard to deliver savings anyhow. So I don't think we've got that luxury. The one bit of assurance I want to give you is that we don't let go of the savings. So as you will see from the Q1 report, you heard me talk about the prior year savings. Now, some of those may still be being monitored 3 years in. So unless there is a very good reason why they can't be achieved, then we will continue to monitor those savings going forward. So the percentage could creep up. And as you've heard me say, we're virtually on 100% this year already, but we won't. It's very unlikely that you ever quite achieve the 100% because of all the variables I've talked about. So I'm not uncomfortable with it. And yes, it comes out as red, but I'm not uncomfortable compared to other local authorities.
Thank you, Jill. I think it just highlights the difficult position that we are in as an authority.
Absolutely.
With trying to find these cuts all the time from what are very, very lean budgets. Thank you.
Particularly when some of those budget savings can be blown out of the water by the pandemic, and some of them have been, haven't they, Jill? And then we've had fortuitous savings that sometimes can compensate for that. But Jill is a very hard taskmaster. A very effective chief finance officer. So I know she'll keep lashing the whip to try and get that 100%. 100% completion of all the savings. Okay, Councillor Burnett is next, please.
Thank you. I'll just be quick because I'm mindful of the time. I just wanted to make the case for some of our wellbeing objectives that are linked to social services, and to stress the point that we are demand-led, and that demand has only really just started to increase and will continue increasing, and it's something that we are not going to have control over. So in terms of the number of looked after children, I'm pleased to see that we've remained ambitious in our targets, which are driven by Welsh Government to bring our numbers of looked after children down, as long as it's safe to do so. I need to stress that point, is that we don't have control over that. But what I wanted to do is to pay tribute to our early help and early intervention teams, who have, despite the pandemic, managed to keep our referral rates down, particularly in our teams around families, teams working in the community, teams that are coordinating volunteers. That's just been exemplary throughout the period, and it really shows and highlights how effective communities are when they're resourced appropriately, and prevention is a huge priority for us as an agenda, and this year it's really seen how that's paying off, and how more resources in prevention could impact on our figures going forward.
Absolutely, I think we all echo that that tribute to staff in that service who continue to provide essential support to families. Can I also add, and I don't need a response from the corporate director for communities, simply to comment on the indicators around percentage of indoor learning space in primary and secondary schools benefiting from high-speed Wi-Fi connectivity for 30+ simultaneous devices. I know that those indicators have been directly impacted by the pandemic, but we're working very, very hard to ensure that we reach that 100%, and I'm confident we will do. And then one other indicator that's read and I think is worthy of some explanation is just around the percentage of BCBC operational buildings achieving full statutory compliance. I know that we are very rigorous in ensuring our buildings are safe and the basic essential safety checks are carried out. But obviously, again, for the benefit of members and members of the public that are here today, could Janine just confirm that is the case and provide that brief explanation of that particular performance indicator, please?
Yes, not a problem, Leader, of course. We are, yes, health and safety is one of our top priorities and statutory compliance, absolutely. We report on the big five, what we call the big five. So that's gas, electricity, water, asbestos and Legionella. They're the ones in particular because they're the ones that contain the highest risk. Now, that number does look very disappointing, but I'm afraid, Leader, it doesn't reflect the current situation. We didn't have any buildings that were considered unsafe. I'm glad to say that. What we had at a point in time was 54%, or whatever the percentage was, 54, wasn't it, of certification on our system. Now, what we do is we don't count a building as having statutory compliance until we have all the certification and we see it, because we have to have a benchmark here and have some audible audit trails. There were lots of, to be fair, there were lots of surveys going on. This was in the middle of the COVID pandemic and access to premises was difficult and fraught at times. But what I would like to say is we're currently at a position now of 83% of compliance. And I'd like to think that we could get as near as we could to 100% compliance. That is our target. So I have to say that doesn't accurately reflect the picture at the time. It's a much better picture than that. But of course, we will continue and strive to ensure that we get into this cycle, because things like fire risk assessments, for instance, have to be completed annually. So what we need to do is ensure that everybody has robust compliance to begin with. Then we have an annual programme to ensure everything's in place. So it's a much better picture already, Leader, because we've completed a lot of surveys. COVID didn't help us, but I'd like to assure you that going forward, we'll be near as damn it, close to 100%.
Oh, thanks very much. That is reassuring. I'm happy to move the recommendations if I have done so already. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Everyone in agreement with those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the next report, I should have asked, I don't think I have, I should have asked Councillor Patel if you have any declarations of interest which you need to make.
No, I don't, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. So the next report is a report of the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, and this will be presented by the Head of Adult Social Care. So a very warm welcome to Jackie Davis, and over to you, please, Jackie.
Okay, thanks, Leader, and thanks for this afternoon. And so the purpose of the report in front of you today is to provide Cabinet with an update in respect of the recommissioning work being undertaken for independent domiciliary care and our short break service. So we're seeking approval to undertake a procurement exercise to invite tenders to establish a framework agreement for our commission regulated home care providers. We're also looking to seek approval to waiver the current contract procedural rules to vary the current framework agreements we have in place by just extending them for a further 3 months. So the background details are contained in the report, and in paragraph 3.7, it advises that back in September 2017, Cabinet approved the award of the framework for 15 providers that we have in place. So the full extension period has been utilised and is due to end on December 2021, hence our requesting a further extension for 3 months. But also contained in the report is details of our short break service. And just a few things about that really. So following a series of stakeholder engagement and consultation events, we had a successful tender exercise. Approval was granted and the duration of those current contracts was for 2 years, which commenced in July 2019 with the option to extend for a further 24 months. So in terms of this particular service, having safe and flexible and effective care at home services are an essential part of our overall strategy within the council about supporting individuals to remain independent. And in 4.1, it gives details of how this demand has increased over the last three years to the tune of 8% really. So the demand on care and support at home, post-COVID, we're still yet to fully understand the impact in our communities and the population of the health of our population, really. And we are reporting currently that the service is experiencing significant increase in the level of need. And it's forecast that, in terms of the long-term impact of that is already against a pressured area around ageing population, increased dementia rates. And I suppose that the amount of demand that we're experiencing now, it was predicted. So Welsh Government produced a rehabilitation framework back last year, and that was intended for us to do some service planning and around the increase in rehabilitation and therefore the impact that would have on social care. And it talks about population groups, so those that were recovering from COVID, those that paused their medical interventions, those that had routine interventions, and those that were isolating and didn't go out of the house, and therefore physical and their mental well-being may have had an impact on that really. So it's recognised now across the whole of health and social care that the independent domiciliary and our care at home services is absolutely fundamental to the whole service and our ability to support people and to keep them independent really. But unless we've got significant quality and our capacity of that, the whole system is at risk, as well as those individuals really. So one of the fundamental changes over the last few years is around the social care workforce, and there are now specific requirements in terms of registration and qualifications for people who work in this area. Those regulations are seeking to create a highly skilled professional workforce, but to work with those people that are, the most challenging times of their lives, really. So in terms of our ability to have sufficient quantity as well as quality and our capacity moving forward, our social care market is fragile, and the recruitment and retention, and I know we've already spoken about recruitment and retention today, poses a significant challenge for us in the care sector. In terms of pay and employee terms and conditions, they're being comparatively low. We're in direct competition with other economies around hospitality and retail more specifically, but also our health colleagues and the impact potentially that Brexit's had on that. However, in Bridgend, we've always been ambitious. We've been ambitious about our services, and our next stage would be to establish a more flexible and outcome regulated care at home service. So as we move towards a more outcome focused way of commissioning, it would be both in terms of social outcomes as well as personal outcomes for people. So back in May, we did a market testing event with our contracted providers, and they gave really positive feedback about the way that we commissioned our short break services back in 2019. So the service model was also favourable by some potentially new providers that were in attendance. And they commented on that our focus would be around the voice of the person, the choice of the person, and the control for the individual, but also about the flexibility, which would allow a more person-centred approach to working. So in terms of our existing frameworks and agreements that we've got in place, the proposal is to implement a 4-year framework that would bring both our IDC and our short breaks in line with each other. So in terms of our commitment to work for high quality and experienced service providers, as part of the tender process, we're going to have a strong emphasis on quality. So this would a cost quality ratio of 20/30, which would, is in line with what I've been saying, really. So in terms of the price schedule, the report provides some details of what our previous approach has been and how we look to take that forward. So in 4.8, it provides details that the National Commissioning Board, which is on behalf of Welsh Government, has recently undertaken and published some cost modelling that sets out what it deems is an anticipated cost of care for 21-22 in a variety of care settings, including domiciliary services. So what we're proposing as part of this process is that we'll use the rates as a range within which providers submit their bids as part of the tender process. So this price scheduling concept was tested with a number of potential bidders at the market testing event that we had in May, and those that were in attendance were unanimous in agreeing that this was definitely a positive way forward for this sector. So at that point, Leader, I think I'll just take you to the recommendations.
Thanks so much for that comprehensive report, Jackie. I can see that Councillor Burnett wants to come in, so I'll bring her in next, please.
Thank you, Jackie, for that presentation, and thank you as well to Pete, who I know wrote the report, because I think it's particularly well written and explains in a very comprehensive and understandable way how innovative we are being as an authority when it comes to our domiciliary care. And I'm really proud to move the report on that basis. I'm very aware through conversations with directors and yourself how fragile adult social care particularly is, how fragile the market is, and how the difficulties of recruitment and retention of our workforce and the consequences that's having on us. There is a commitment from Welsh Government to pay in the real living wage for care workers, and resources for that can't come soon enough. But in the meantime, we are doing all that we can through our procurement to ensure that providers are locked into paying the real living wage through part of the procurement process, rather than this sort of race to the bottom and trying to compete with each other on price. So the balance between price and quality is really welcome, and I know that it will make a significant difference. £1 or £1 or £2 an hour on will make a difference over the monthly wage packet for an individual, and hopefully ensure that we are keeping those caring individuals who have a very particular skill set which isn't shared. They're not shared by many people in society. I certainly would struggle working in that capacity, and this is the start of us in ensuring that they feel valued, and also that the outcomes for our residents are the best that they can be as well. So this is a win-win situation, and I'm really pleased that we are brave enough to be working in this way and setting the pace really for other authorities to follow.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burnett. I'm equally pleased and proud that we are receiving this report today and making this commitment to pay the real living wage. It's nothing less than the workforce deserve after the 15-16 months they've just been through. We need to show how much we value our care workers, and clapping on its own is not enough. What they want and need is better terms and conditions, and this is about providing better terms and conditions to our social care workforce, because they are our workforce, because we commission them and they deliver care that is essential to people that rely on it, and they deliver it on our behalf. And I know it's a commitment of Welsh Government. It's in their programme for government to deliver a real living wage, but we want to start to deliver that now, not in the future, but get on and deliver it as soon as possible. But of course, we will look to Welsh Government for financial support to enable us to implement this as quickly as possible. Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader. I just wanted to come in to say that I'm 100% in support of this and would like to second the recommendations in the report. It's no secret that carers are some of the most poorly paid people in society, and I don't think the pay reflects the importance of the job. I also know that it's women that mainly take up this role, and again, that's it's a sad fact, but it is, and therefore I'm really pleased to see this report here, because I do think that increasing their salary will help them lift themselves out of poverty, and you know, and some of them are in poverty, like it isn't a secret, and yeah, so I just wanted to come in and second that. Thanks, Leader.
Thanks so much. That's a really important point, Councillor Patel, about the equality, the inequality that low pay exasperates quite often, because the majority, if not the vast majority, Jackie, of workers in the sector are women. There are some men, I know, but most are women, and most will be receiving a low level of pay. Jackie, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for the comments. Really, I suppose I just wanted to clarify a point, really, particularly around real living wage. What we're proposing to do as part of this tender is that we will use the rates that are described in 4.1 that we've got from the National Commissioning Board, and we'll use those rates as the range within which providers submit their bids. So it'll be within that range, really, which will be part of our tender process, really. We wouldn't be able to dictate how much they pay, but our tender process will allow them to do that within the range that we're setting, really, in terms of that descriptiveness. So slightly different, yeah.
Yeah, point understood. It's making sure that we abide by the vast range of legislation and regulations that govern procurement of and commissioning of services, but our commitment and intent is being made clear, isn't it, Jackie, to providers, and as you've described, providers are very, very keen, actually, independent providers, to offer this, because they recognise that it's actually about a recruitment and retention of staff as well, and pay obviously is a factor in that, isn't it? So I hope that this initiative will help with that too. Jackie, did you want to come back in?
Just to respond back, really, whilst pay and condition is, for all the reasons that we've talked about, there's also evidence that by people working in a different way in this, that supports the retention of staff as well, because it's in terms of their job satisfaction and in terms of, why people came into the business in the first place, really. So by doing things in a more outcome focused, person-centred way, actually we're hoping will help us with our retention of staff in the sector as well.
And that's been demonstrated elsewhere where this approach has been pioneered. So that's very encouraging, isn't it? And a strong, sound evidence base for this approach here in Bridgend. Okay, the recommendations have been moved and moved by Councillor Patel, seconded by Councillor Patel. Is everyone in agreement, please?
Aye.
Thank you, colleagues.
Yep,
thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you very much, Pete, our Group Manager for Commission, for joining us, and you're very welcome to stay, but but please don't feel that you have to, because that's the only report on social services and wellbeing today. Okay, so next, thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you very much, Pete. The next report that we will receive is on the Porthcawl Waterfront regeneration scheme and the proposed compulsory purchase order, and this will be presented by the Corporate Director for Communities, as it's another one of Janine's reports. So over to you, please, Janine.
Oh, thank you very much, Leader. Today I've also got Paul Ryan is with me on the call, should we need any more detailed questions, because he's been working on the CPO process for us, Leader. But should we need to, we can call Paul in as well. So this is a very legalistic report, I have to admit, because the compulsory purchase order process is a statutory process. So this report is accompanied by 3 very detailed appendices. So what I'd like to do today, if I may, is attempt to draw your attention to the most salient points, because I know you've read the report. It's a very lengthy report, goes into a lot of detail. So if I may, I'll just draw your attention to the points I think that we need to discuss today. So the purpose of the report then is to seek formal resolution of Cabinet to make, advertise, notify and progress confirmation of a compulsory purchase order to acquire land, and also to authorise the advertisement of proposed appropriation of council-owned land for planning purposes. And both of these are to support the Porthcawl Waterfront Regeneration Scheme. Now, within the report, the background is set out in section 3, and this scheme has been going on for some years. It's gone back nearly 14 years, back to 2007 when it first started. And I won't go through this in detail, as I know it's well known and also it's set out in the report. But to suffice to say that this report will now highlight the next steps in making of these CPOs to acquire the land and enable this project to move forward for us. But what I will say at this point, Leader, is that this is just the start of quite a lengthy process to prepare this redevelopment area, and any land disposal we undertake after any CPOs come through will be accompanied by a development brief, which will set out the parameters of what we will expect as a council. Then all development will be subject to a full planning application, and that involves the pre-application consultation as well as the full consultation for the application itself. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for residents and the community to be consulted and also to express their views as the project progresses. Now, section 4 of the report sets out the current situation with the land that we have down in Porthcawl. The council owns land in Sandy Bay and Coney Beach, and in 2011 entered into a legal agreement with a third-party owner to enable the wider area to come forward as a single development site. And that landowner agreement is still in existence and in place. However, there are some small areas of land, including lanes, and some unoccupied land parcels where the title needs to be cleansed. So basically we need to understand who owns them and put them into one ownership. And we need to do that to make a holistic land assembly. Also, there's some areas where a third party ownership needs to be acquired. Now, the council has attempted, the Corporate Landlord Department, to acquire the third-party land through negotiations. And when we talk about that third-party land, I'm talking about the Monster Park, or as it's formerly known, the Model Village land. Now, we failed, I'm afraid, in our negotiations with the owner, and it's now considered that the council should use its CPO power to acquire that area of land compulsory. And this is because this land parcel is in approximately the centre of the regeneration site, really, and is considered critical to the comprehensive redevelopment of the area. Plus, it's a vacant site, it's not used for anything currently. So the areas that are subject to the CPO are shown in Appendix 1 on the map edged in red. We've also got them described in Appendix 2 in some detail. And there is also in Appendix 3 a draft statement of reasons as to why we're going ahead with the CPO. Now, all those things are needed legally and by statute, and they're all set out in very much detail there. So as the CPO is a legal process, it's strictly governed, and only a local authority can undertake this order and acquire the land. And as a reason of that, the land then has to be vested in the local authority's ownership after that point for the greater public benefit. Now, paragraph 4.3 and onward sets out the rights of the council under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 to appropriate land for the purposes of achieving development, redevelopment or improvement. Now, this is a positive planning power, leader, for the council to use, and it's proposed that Sandy Bay be appropriated to planning in order to provide a mixed-use development on the site. Now, paragraph 4.8 sets out what could be composed on that site, how that development could look, and essentially it includes a new road running from east to west, a new enlarged Griffin Park, and that's important. Not only do we want to improve Griffin Park, we want to make it larger. At this stage, approximately 912 dwellings on the combined sites of Coney Beach and Sandy Bay. And why that figure is important, it's the figure that's used in the Local Development Plan, or LDP, which is out currently for deposit. It's out for consultation. There'll be recreation and leisure uses, of course, retail and commercial uses, new parks and open space, because that's really important. And we'd like to see, dare I say, a green lung running through the development, and possibly a new primary school or a possible extension of existing. Of course, that's to be determined under the School Organisation Code. But what must be recognised, though, is that there is an area containing some residential dwellings and some commercial units in the centre of the site, the centre on the front, including the high tide, and these are not included in the redevelopment proposals because they're ongoing commercial concerns. And it's anticipated that that area in particular could form part of a local neighbourhood centre in any of the redevelopment proposals. That's maybe we could locate shops, etc. in that area. But what is clear, though, is that the physical redevelopment of the waterfront in this manner will clearly enhance the attractiveness of the town as a place to live and to work. Plus, for us, we like the fact it has much wider benefits for the town centre and socio-economic benefits for the broader settlement of Porthcawl. Now, when we look at paragraph 4.13 onwards, that describes the process of disposal, what we would do to dispose of the land. So once any CPO is achieved, it is proposed we dispose the land via a tender process. Now, that will be accompanied with a detailed development brief, which will guide the type of development that we wish to see. And we've just described that, all the variables we'd like to see. Plus, of course, you then need the benefit of planning permission on top of that. And that is why we considered the CPOs need to be brought forward ahead of the disposal process, because we need to confirm that all the land is available and the titles are cleansed in order that we can have a disposal of this area. But there's a very, very compelling case, Leader and Cabinet, to compulsory acquire the land because we want to deliver a comprehensive redevelopment. Now, section 4.16 of the report and forward sets out the parameters of the CPO process. It's a legal process under statute, and it explains how and when it can be undertaken. And that's very important because it summarises each area as part of the process, and it has to be for the wider public benefit, Leader. Section 4.35 onwards sets out whether there are any special categories of land as part of this proposal. And what's important here to note is that part of the land at Sandy Bay Beach could be considered as open space, relic dunes, etc. And what we're doing is we're acquiring this land so we can incorporate flood defences and a stepped revetment in that area, and that will considerably enhance public access to the beach, and therefore it's being acquired to preserve and enhance the wider management of the beach area in that location. Now, there are no TPOs on this land, there are no scheduled ancient monuments, but we know it is adjacent to Newton Primary School, which is a Grade 2 listed building, and any development that came forward, we'd want to see it respect the setting of that listed building. Now, section 4.42 onwards sets out the detail behind the appropriation of the former Sandy Bay Caravan Park and parts of Griffin Park. And it's essential that we have both of these set out to cleanse the title of both sites and enable us to look to improve and enlarge Griffin Park. Another section I'd like to draw your attention to, Leader, is section 4.53 in the report. Now, this talks about human rights implications, and this is a critical part of any CPO process. The Cabinet must be sure that when you are using your CPO powers and your land appropriation powers, you justify in interfering with the human rights of those people who have an interest in the land. Now, a lot of the land that we are CPO in, the smaller lanes, there's no interest because they're not registered land. But the land that we do have in the Monster Park is a vacant area of land. So we need to ensure that when we CPO that, we give compensation, a monetary compensation, the value of which will be agreed by the district valuer. So there's a very compelling case in the public interest for undertaking both these processes, as it will secure economic development, social, physical and environmental regeneration of the area. Now, the proposal also positively supports our policies and procedures, and it's a key housing allocation in our deposit local development plan, which, as we discussed earlier, is currently up for consultation. Section 8 of the report is about financial implications. Now, of course, it's very, very difficult to understand what these may be at the outset of this process, because it's premature, because we haven't undertaken the statutory process. However, we do know the district valuation for the Monster Park, and we also feel that any valuation on the lanes and some of the small roadways we're acquiring wouldn't be onerous and wouldn't be prohibitive. But any monies that we spend acquiring these areas of land, or it actually in statute it's called compensation, they will be reimbursed from the capital land receipts that we get when we dispose of the land at the end. So there'll be no cost to us because we'll get that reimbursed. So please may I take you to the recommendations, Leader. There's 5 recommendations in the report about us going ahead with the CPO and the appropriation of this land as the start of a process to regenerate this area of Porthcawl. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Janine. I'll invite Councillor Smith to come in, please. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Janine, for that very clear explanation of what we are doing at Sandy Bay. I hope our observers in Porthcawl were listening very carefully to the explanation, because I think it set it out very clearly. But just for avoidance of doubt or misunderstanding, could I stress a couple of things? First of all, that when we talk about the waterfront, we are talking about the Salt Lake site, and we're talking about Sandy Bay as well. In fact, we're talking about the whole waterfront, really, from Rest Bay to Newton. And what we're about is having a master plan for connectivity and placemaking along the whole of that waterfront. And for the avoidance of confusion, because I know that there are 2 things in particular which regular Porthcawl observers want to comment on, and that's consultations and car parking. We're at the moment towards the end of a consultation on the LDP, the Local Development Plan. That consultation ends on the 27th, and we are deliberately keeping the consultation on the placemaking master plan for a little bit later, September-ish, so that there's no confusion between the two. So consultation on what we're talking about today in its very wide context is coming up, and a car parking strategy will be part of that consultation. And in the LDP that we are putting forward, it quite clearly states that no developer can take place unless there's a car parking strategy that goes with it. So I hope that's of some reassurance. None of the developments we're talking about are going to make Porthcawl unviable as a place to live or work or visit due to car parking, because there will have to be a credible and viable and actual car parking strategy to go with it. I'd like to mention just one particular aspect, which is the Dinosaur Park, or the Model Village Park. Again, and also thank you, Janine, for mentioning the existing businesses who aren't touched by this. I think that's very important to mention that we've got a neighbour there in Park Dean, a large and very forward-looking organisation, and we've got an excellent business there at the High Tide, and an important employer, and an employer who knows the market well and provides things which people actually want. So it's very important to stress that they're not touched by this compulsory purchase order. But I think there has been some information and misinformation and some misunderstanding, in particular, about the Model Village, or the Dinosaur Park, the Monster Park as it's colloquially known. And I think it might be useful for Paul to say something about what's going on there, because of unfounded rumours that somebody is going to make huge profits out of this Monster Park, that the Monster Park is going to be flattened to become some sort of inner bypass, and we'll lose any ecological benefits there. That's not how it's going to work, as I understand it. And perhaps Paul could tell us something about the complexities of ownership there, and the way that the valuation is conducted. Just because somebody doesn't want to sell doesn't mean that they can hold out for a high price. The valuation is done by a third party. I'm sure Paul can elucidate on that much better than I can.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
We'll lead over to Paul for a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yes, there's been some confusion over the Model Village, or Monster Park as it's called, and I think confusion comes because there are two 10-year interests there. Our joint venture partner in terms of the general development has a long leasehold interest over the property, which has some 29 years to run at the paltry sum of well, below £200 a year. That they have agreed to, as part of the owners' agreement, bring forward their leasehold interest into the general development area. And the compulsory purchase order is purely going to be for the freehold interest, which is owned by a family trust. The family trust is in somewhat disarray at the moment because the many of the trustees are very old. A couple have passed away recently. We had negotiated a price which their surveyor had agreed with our negotiating surveyor, but the trustees found it far too difficult to make a decision and essentially said, well, we'll just let the CPO do what it does. But in terms of the owners' agreement, any compensatory payment to the trustees who own the Monster Park is to be paid by our joint venture partner. It's not to come out of the council's funds. It will be paid by the JV partner as part of the owners' agreement. He will then be able to merge the two interests to offer freehold vacant possession, which he will bring forward as part of the owner's agreement for full development. So it's quite interesting that out of all the pieces of land that we're looking to acquire, the major compensatory payment will be this one on the Monster Park. That is being covered by our third party partner. So,
okay, thank you for that, Paul, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you wanted to add, Janine, or shall I bring Councillor Patel in?
If I could, please, Leader. So just to be clear then, the freehold interest will sit with the council, Bridgend Council, and Mr Evans, the third party, will retain his leasehold interest. But the council will, as a CPO, only we can hold the vested interest in the land. But I think Paul described that beautifully then. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And you can confirm again, just for the record and for anyone who's interested, who's listening, and I know there are people who are listening and interested, it's that the value will be determined by the district valuer, won't it? It'll be, and
yes, as the next phase, it will be a valuer who is appointed by the Welsh ministers, and in the majority of cases they will employ the valuation office agency, the district valuer, to carry out that valuation.
And will be appointed by Welsh Government. Okay, thank you for that, Paul. So that's obviously independent of us and independent of the owner of the land. Then Councillor Patel is next, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Paul. I think I have a question for you, but just wanted to say that I really liked the little potted history that's on page 145 of the pack. It was just a kind of history of the site or Porthcawl from 1866 to now, and I just thought that was quite nice to read. My point is, or my question even, is that I noticed that there's obviously a number of titles that we're looking to put together, and most of them there are freehold interests. And I was just wondering, there's a couple in there that we're taking the leasehold interest only, and then also all interests except for the freehold. So I just wondered why that was really.
It's a strange way of writing it, but essentially, for example, I think it's plot 1B, which are the steps and the ramp down from the bottom of Mackworth Road onto the beach. Our third party partner owns the freehold of that land, so we only need to acquire the leasehold.
Okay.
So where we are excluding all freeholds is because the third party already has it. So.
Excellent. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. That's a helpful clarification there from Paul. Janine, can you confirm as well that whilst this process is a very important part of the process, it on its own does not secure the right to development? So, for example, I've seen some feedback where there's concern around the ecological impact. If there is any wildlife of interest, any wildlife that's protected, then the CPO process does not override any of those processes. Those processes are still there in law. There's still a need to seek a planning application for any development, and there's still the master plan and the LDP. Also, very, very important processes that are underway and will need to be in place before any developments can take place, regardless of whether or not land has been compulsory purchased. I can see that Councillor Baldwin wants to come in, but can you confirm that that's correct, Janine?
Yes, absolutely, Leader. You summed that up beautifully there. All this compulsory purchase order does is change the ownership of the land, and that is it. Then everything else is reliant on the planning system, including ecological surveys, tree surveys. We'll be looking at the site investigations. We'll be looking at transport implications, and all of this will be a key part of the planning process. But before we even get to the planning process, Leader, we'll be doing this placemaking piece, which Charles has talked about. Then we will be looking at a disposal brief, a development brief that goes with the disposal, which suggests the type of development and the things we are expecting to see. And then right at the end of that becomes a very, very detailed planning process, including ecological surveys, etc., as you would expect from a development of this size. So to be fair, this is, if we're talking about a hurdles race, Leader, we're just about approaching the first hurdle. There's a lot of hurdles to go, I'm afraid, before we get to the final line, but rightly so, because we want to get this right. It's such an important part of our regeneration of Porthcawl. There's a long way to go, but the two are not connected. They're two different processes.
Thank you for that explanation and confirmation, Janine. It's helpful. Councillor Baldwin is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. And as usual, we're going a little bit later. The questions that you plan to ask usually get answered before. So I just wanted to pick up on something from discussions as well. It was around the owners' agreement in relation to the split. And I just wanted to have clarity on the calculation of that 40-60 split and how that was against land value and land quantity, please.
Yes, of course, Councillor Baldwin, not a problem at all. Yes, so it's a historic agreement back from many years ago, and basically it is based on land value, not land area. So when we look at the complexity of the land, it isn't that the third party owns 40% and we own 60%. It's far more sophisticated than that. We looked at land values across the piece. For instance, some land that is right on the front of the frontage that overlooks the beach and has sweeping views will have a higher proportionate value than some land at the rear of the development. So what we did is we had independent valuations undertaken of all parcels of land in that area. When we put those valuations together, the 40-60 split was apportioned on land value, not area. So this doesn't mean to say that the third party has 40% of the land. That isn't the case, but they have 40% of the value of the land, because their land might be more valuable than ours. And importantly as well, to understand, Councillor Baldwin, it's not just value of land. That third party in the agreement has to pay 40% of the costs of getting us to that position in that we can redevelop. So for instance, all of the costs involved with progressing this CPO process, as we've talked about, and the appropriation, when we come to looking at the costs of that, we will be apportioning them 40-60 as per the agreement, and we do have we invoice our third party partner quarterly for some of the monies that they contribute towards the deal. So it's pretty black and white in terms of the agreement. We won't be, whilst we have the owners agreement in place, we won't be reviewing the 40-60, and not even, dare I say, the acquisition of the Monster Park makes any difference really, because the Monster Park leasehold stays with the third party, but the freehold changes from the trust to BCBC. That doesn't alter the values of the land. So it's a 40 to the third party, 60% BCBC, and any work, for instance, even flood revetment work that we did, all of those costs are spread equally. But of course, what we will be doing is seeking Welsh Government grants or some grant assistance to help us with some of that infrastructure work, because it's very expensive on the foreshore currently, and the Prom, Eastern Prom and the Breakwater. We've got a £6.1 million grant from Welsh Government to undertake that work. And I'm quite sure the flood revetment work that we're looking at on Coney Beach will be somewhere akin to that value as well. So we will be looking at grants for that. So hopefully that clarifies that it's the 40-60 split is based on land value, not land area.
And so the public beach then is not included in that. The value of overlooking it is, but not the actual square footage of the beach.
Yeah, because you can't do anything with the beach, Councillor Baldwin, is protected, of course, but there is a value of that land, of course, that overlooks that beach. In fact, I would say that's where the highest value of that site is, that frontage.
Okay, thank you. And I'd quite happily then move that report if it hasn't already been moved, Leader.
Okay, thank you. And do we have a seconder to that?
Yeah, I'll second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I think one important point before we conclude this discussion then, perhaps you can outline next steps, because this is not at this stage to compulsory purchase the land, but it is to make orders to do so. And there will, of course, be an opportunity for members of the public to object, and then if there are objections, that will be referred to Welsh ministers to make decisions, and they, of course, will, if considered necessary, appoint inspectors to potentially hold a public inquiry. So that's outlined in the report. So those are the next steps. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Janine?
No, not really, Leader. You've summed it up. It's about notices and advertising moving forward. People can object, and if they do, it gets referred to Welsh Government. Welsh Government make decisions, so we can't do anything. We just have to go with the process now. The Welsh Government will make the decision for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Janine. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations as moved and seconded?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much, Janine. And the second report from our Corporate Director for Communities today is on the plans for Pencoed Road Bridge and Pencoed Level Crossing. So Janine, once again, please, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Well, before I even talk about the purpose of the report, I've got to say I'm really pleased to be able to bring this report to Cabinet today. This Pencoed Road Bridge and the level crossing is without doubt one of the largest infrastructure projects that we've ever proposed and developed in BCBC history. And I'm delighted to be able to bring this to start the process today. Just to say that I've got a number of my colleagues on the line today with us, Leader, should we need further questions. I've got John Parsons, who's my group manager for planning, and I've also got Wayne, who's one of my engineers, and I've also got Joseph, who's with us as well, who does active travel. So I've got everybody here who can answer any pertinent questions you should have. So if I just take you through what is the purpose of the report then. Well, the purpose of the report is to inform Cabinet of the current progress relating to this major capital transport investment, which is to improve the multimodal accessibility within Pencoed, and it's to bring you up to date with the recent work that we've undertaken. Now, section 3 of the report, Leader, sets out the background to where we've got to, how we've come to this position. And what is very clear is that the issues in Pencoed with the railway line severing the community from those who reside in the west to the east are well documented. We understand that it creates significant traffic congestion in the town. There's particular emphasis on the Hendra level crossing and the road bridge. It's all around those areas at Penbrisk. Now, the impact of the congestion is a constraint to Pencoed's future capability for growth. But more importantly, it generates negative impacts, both economically and environmentally, on the community who are there. That includes traffic queues, emissions, noise, and from idling traffic. And hopefully this scheme should be able to rectify these. Now, paragraph 3.4 onwards sets out the WELTAG process, and this is an important part of developing transport infrastructure. And what WELTAG stands for is Welsh Transport Appraisal Guidance. It's what Welsh Government asks us to do. There are 5 stages to WELTAG, and every time we come up with a major transport scheme, we have to go through a WELTAG process. Now, the beginning of this process, we looked at a number of things. WELTAG stage 1, we looked at congestion, as we talked about, any delays, queues, etc., and the impact it had. We looked at severance, how the town had been split essentially into a town of 2 halves by the railway. We looked at the fact that the town had poor active travel links as a result of the railway coming through. We looked at the fact that it did affect the efficacy of public transport in and around the area. Buses found it very hard to stick to timetable because if trains come, and I went on a site visit the other day there with Councillor Stuart Baldwin, our cabinet member, and we were absolutely shocked really to see the amount of trains that passed through that station. I think 3 or 4 passed in 15 minutes. You know, it's a major line that connects, you know, right through South Wales. And the other thing then is the restriction on any new developments. So from this process, a WELTAG stage 2 study came forward and suggested the following options were proposed to improve the situation. The first option they think we need to do is to provide a new enhanced road and pedestrian bridge crossing at Pemprsk Road. So we get a new bridge in that area. And the second proposal is the closure of the level crossing at Hendra Road to road traffic and a new active travel bridge developed. So you would still be able to get over the railway at that point, active travel, but you wouldn't be able to drive through. The traffic would go through a new, wider, enhanced Pemprsk Bridge. Now we want to take these options through to the next stage of development really, which is WELTAG 3. And members will be aware that the closure of the level crossing and a replacement bridge have been long held ambitions of this council. And a steering group has been set up, and on the steering group it comprises representatives from the local community, this council, Borough Council and Town Council, the local MP and MS, Senedd member, the Welsh Office and the Wales Office and Welsh Government, Network Rail and Transport for Wales. So all those key players are sitting around that table. This group meets regularly and it's been fully involved in the WELTAG process. Now, Appendix 1 to this report contains the WELTAG Stage 2 report. We want to see some of the detail that's come through that. Now, Section 4 of the report now talks about the need for a public consultation, and that's what's the next stage. And this is critical to the WELTAG process, and also because it will enable some of those landowners who may be affected by this scheme to be contacted directly to discuss the concepts of the scheme and the engineering activities that are going on, such as trial pits maybe that's required, and what we need to do to progress the design. It gives us an opportunity now to reach out directly to those landowners. Any public consultation we undertake would take place in the autumn of this year, we're hoping, and it'll be critical to engage with the community and ensure that all the issues or any issues they have and any potential solutions are fully explored and assessed. One of the obvious stakeholders here is Network Rail, because they're the people who operate the railway. So what would happen next? So following a favourable public consultation, the project could proceed then to WELTAG 3 stage. Now, what WELTAG 3 means is this is a full and detailed design of the scheme, which maximises the benefits from the project and mitigates any adverse effects and impacts, and it also resolves conflicts, and that's really important. It will also enable us to fully cost up the proposal. Now, outline costs for the proposal as it stands currently are in the region of £17 million. And we will need to be making applications to funding organisations to assist us with that. But what I would caveat at this point is that as we go through and develop the full and detailed plans, that cost may increase, and also we would want to see some public realm improvements as well. So in section 8, we set out what the financial implications are. And I think from all we've said, it's key that it'll be very difficult at this stage to fully understand, the cost. It is 17 million, but it could rise as we develop detailed designs. But the one thing we need to recognise is the current WellTag assessments that we have been undertaking have been funded by Welsh Government so far under the Cardiff Capital Region's Metro programme. Now, potential sources of funding for the 17 million of the money we need for this scheme could come from Welsh Government grants, UK Government grants, such as the Levelling Up Fund, from the City Region, from Network Rail, or dare I say, we could look to seek contributions from Section 106 planning agreements. But what we need to do is explore these funding opportunities and come back to Cabinet and report on them in due course, because they're critical, of course. We can't go forward without the finance to be able to do so. So if I could take you to section 9 of the report, Leader, there's 3 recommendations there. To note the information in the report, can we please proceed to a public consultation, and any consultation outcomes and any funding we would like to bring back to Cabinet to have decisions before we move on further with the project. So with that being said, I'll stop there, Leader.
Thanks very much, Janine. I can see that Councillor Smith wants to bring him in, wants to come in, and then I will bring in Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Smith, please.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Janine. Very welcome report, and congratulations on getting this project to this stage. I've had this project bubbling away ever since I became a Cabinet member. I know it's been an issue for years before that, and I went to a pretty dispiriting meeting with Hugh Rank Davis and others, with somebody called Alan Cairns a little while ago, which absolutely got us nowhere, I'm afraid to say. So it's great to see that this is moving on at last. It's a very important scheme. You rightly point out the frequency of trains on the main line, but that main line, we've also got ambitions for that to be a metro line. So that means we want that line to be working really at full capacity, and we can increase the capacity by keeping that gate closed and not having to interrupt the flow. It's tied up with all sorts of other things. It's tied up with the future of Pyle Station. It's tied up with the future of the Maesteg line, and it improves all those bits of transport. So it's incredibly important. Another politician we don't hear so much of these days is somebody called Christopher Grayling, who could be described, I suppose, as King Midas in reverse. Everything he touched turned into something which most definitely was not gold. And it was he who cancelled the electrification project west of Cardiff. If we want maximum frequency on that line, it needs to be electrified. If we want to really be a carbon neutral county, we want to stop diesel trains coming through the county. So I know this is beyond our control, but will that bridge be future-proofed, Janine, so that if or when electrification does come, the bridge will be high enough and wide enough and have the specifications which will allow electric cables to run beneath it?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. Yeah, absolutely. That's a key part of this scheme, really, is to future-proof. So both the bridge and the pedestrian active travel link will be high enough to allow electrification underneath, and we're working with Capita and Network Rail on this to make sure that we get exactly the right dimensions to enable that to happen. So in short, yes.
Thank you for that, Janine. That's essential to the future proofing and has been part of the planning from the outset, actually. So thanks for confirming that. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to ask the Corporate Director about the consultation process, when we're expecting it to start, and what do we want, what the outcome from that is. Everybody is hoping that through the funding that we will secure to close that level crossing, but what goes there once that is done is in the gift of people within that area. So how are you going to encourage maximum participation in the consultation process to make sure that the infrastructure for travel and active travel and transport meets the needs for into the future? And I haven't been around this that long when it comes to this project, but I do know that others were talking about it, that they've been in Pampers when this was first talked about. So I'm really, really excited that this could be coming forward, at least in my lifetime, because so often projects don't seem to materialise too often. So yeah, if we could just talk a little bit about that consultation process and what we want from that. Please.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Janine, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Councillor Baldwin. Yeah, very good question, actually. It's such an important part of this project now. We're at that stage. Now, we probably won't be consulting until the autumn, and the reason for that is we need to come up with a consultation strategy. So if you approve today that we go ahead, then we'll get working on that. And what we want to do is talk to our equality unit and have a look at a consultation strategy that will suit the community, will work for the community. That's really important. Now, of course, we've got to see what COVID regulations we're in, because what we'd really like to do is to show the large plans, do some exhibitions. There's nothing like standing around the plan and having things explained to you that really sets the context of the scheme we're trying to deliver. Perhaps have some pictures, some visuals of how these things could look. We'd like to discuss further economic benefits. You know, if we close the level crossing, could we create a town square possibly in that area around the monument? Could we do that? Well, of course, recognising we still need access to some businesses for servicing. And also we're going to work with the steering group as well that is set up to understand. Now, all of that, there's an awful lot to do, and we need to get that done by the autumn. So it's just to make sure we reach as many people as possible and people feel they've had the opportunity to comment, come and see the plans. Then what we'll need to do is to consider everything, and any suggestion is a good one. Absolutely, we need to look at the views because people who live in that area might know these things better than ourselves, and we're willing to listen. This is what this is about. We'll consider all the views, work with the steering group, etc. And then we'd like to produce, dare I say, a draft set of plans and respond to the consultation, and then hopefully bring that back to you in Cabinet, possibly in the new year, if we're able to. What I might do now, if you wouldn't mind, Leader, I might ask John Parsons, would he like to come in at this point? Because John is my head of planning and development, and he's run very, very many public consultations. And John, of course, will be running this one. He's currently running the consultation for the LDP, whether he wants to add anything to what I've just said.
Of course, thank you, Janine. A very warm welcome to Jonathan and colleagues. Jonathan, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Janine. The purpose of the recording, my name is Jonathan Parsons, the Group Manager for Planning and Development Services. I think Janine has captured the spirit of what we intend to do with the consultation quite well there. I think it's important to maximise the consultation as much as we possibly can, because this project, although it's primarily a transport-related project, and we have to look at the benefits that this will bring in transport terms. And I was in a meeting with TfW this morning where we're talking about the MEF, the Metro Enhancement Framework, and that line from Maesteg, Bridgend, Cardiff and links into Porthcawl are one of the key transport corridors. So we've got to maximise the benefit in transport terms, but also the opportunity to create economic
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, John. Indeed, we'll have to carefully consider the engagement and consultation process around this project, and we'll do as much as we can, whilst of course following whatever COVID restrictions are in place at that particular point in time. And one of the difficulties we will have with this project, we have with every project currently, is that we're having to plan a consultation process without having any we can undertake some activities like face-to-face consultation, which has always been at the heart of the engagement that we undertake with our communities, and that has obviously been curtailed because of the need to protect residents from COVID, and that uncertainty is still there. But we'll plan as best we can. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And first of all, obviously very supportive of the taking away the level crossing at that point. Is it creates complete haddock in Pencoed at the train times. I'm just going to sort of throw it in. Have you considered going under the line? And what is the what would the implications of that be? Because that would certainly future-proof any overhead cables or whatever, and I would imagine would have a lower future maintenance cost. So has that been considered?
Well, I'm going to
invite... just have a glass of water, and then I'll ask Janine to answer that. Answer that interesting suggestion. Janine, please. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yeah, well, actually, it's not a bad suggestion because we did it down in Cardiff Bay, didn't we? We went underneath the community. But I think the issue that we've got here, if I'm truthful, is this is a main railway line, and anything going under may disrupt that. I think I can bring John in shortly. I think it was something that was discussed briefly and then taken off the table because of stability of ground, and also just to work next to a busy working railway itself is hugely onerous. You've got to put up hoardings. The health and safety implications of working on a line are crazy difficult. So I think where we are, Deputy Leader, is that it was on the table, it was an option, but I'm afraid I think it probably was removed quite swiftly. But I've got Leader Wayne, Wayne Palmer, one of our engineers, has put up his hand. I think he might be a good person to answer that question for us.
Hi, thank you. Hello, Leader and Janine. Yeah, we did. It was very briefly looked at, but the engineering possibilities, there's flooding issues. To actually put it underneath, you'd have to close the railway line. We estimated for as much as 5 to 6 months. So you can't keep the railway line going on top while you're building the tunnel underneath. Just like when you mentioned down Cardiff Bay, they did a cut and cover. So you remove the top and then put the top back on afterwards. So you'd have had to shut the railway line for long periods. So it wasn't the option that at first it did look actually quite feasible, but further investigation, no, it wasn't. And the cost would have been astronomical.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Yeah, that's easily understood, isn't it, Deputy?
It just looks like the hill is there, isn't it? It lends itself to going underneath, like. But there we are. I accept the explanation.
Thank you, and that may have been a reason why Network Rail are so keen on the bridge option, and I think it is important at this stage to highlight the involvement of Network Rail from day one on this phase of the project, and undoubtedly that has been one of the reasons for the success. So I wanted to place on record our thanks to officials from Network Rail, our thanks to the MP Chris Elmore and Hiranka Davis, who've been very busy behind the scenes making the case for this to Welsh Government and to UK Government and convening the meetings, and our appreciation too also to Pencoed Town Council for their contribution, and they've continued to make the case for this proposal. And one of the reasons why Network Rail have continued to be very keen is because level crossings are a risk. They are a significant risk, and it's incumbent upon Network Rail to reduce that risk. And we cannot forget as well that had the electrification gone ahead, as Councillor Smith had outlined, this bridge would have been replaced, and it would have been replaced through funding from electrification, funding from the UK Government pot. Therefore, there's a compelling case for UK Government to make a significant contribution to this infrastructure, because it is part of the railway infrastructure as well as being a local and regional transport facility. And I know that and we welcome the contribution from the Wales office, and that they are listening and helping to make that case to UK Government, because we will need that funding from UK Government to make this project a reality. And if we can get that, it will be, without any question, the single biggest transport project in the history of Bridgend County Borough Council. I cannot think of a project that comes near to it in terms of its scale. And I'm really pleased that it is as much about active travel as it is about any other form of transport. And that is a sign of the importance to be attached to active travel, because We've seen record investment, continued record investment. There it was indeed a report earlier, wasn't there, about the 2.5 million that we're investing in active travel in Pencoed and also between Pyle and Porthcawl. But this would be the latest and one of the most important phases in completing that network of active travel routes in the town of Pencoed. So it's another reason for the support that I'm sure we will receive from all partners for this project. And finally, particularly on a very hot day like today, where we've had a warning from the Met Office, we know that air quality can decline in very hot weather. We know that queuing traffic can cause air pollution problems, and we have a statutory duty to improve air quality and make sure that air quality does not decline. And therefore, this project is essential to that in terms of ensuring the smooth flow of traffic in the town. And therefore, I'm very, very pleased that we've got this report and we've made this progress, and no doubt we'll continue to make more progress. And we look forward to seeing the consultation and the result of that consultation. Is everyone in agreement with the recommendations, please?
Yes, agreed.
Yes, thank you. Excellent. Thanks very much, Janine. The next report is on the suspension of the contract procedure rules for home to school transport, minibuses and taxis. So I should have said as well a big thank you to Jonathan, Joseph and Wayne, and thank you very much for all the work that you've done on this project and the work that I'm sure you will have to do in the future, and I know you'll do it very well. Lindsay, please, as our Corporate Director for Education and Family Support on the report on school transport, minibuses and taxis, please.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to request that Cabinet suspends the relevant parts of the Council's contract procedure rules in respect to the requirement to re-tender 154 proposed contracts for home to school transport services, and to authorise me as your statutory officer to enter into contracts directly with the relevant operators for the autumn term of 2021-2022. You'll be aware, Leader, the local authority has a statutory duty to ensure suitable home to school transport arrangements are in place for eligible learners. And this is primarily achieved via the contracting of transport providers, transport services from the private sector. In October last year, Cabinet approved a procurement exercise to invite tenders to bid for contracts for multiple home to school transport services for a term of 5 years, with the option to extend by 2 further periods of 1 year. The indicative total amount of the full term was identified as 34.2 million. In order to ensure that the local authority is meeting its statutory responsibilities, a procurement exercise was progressed during June and July this year for taxis, minibuses, special taxis and special minibuses. I can confirm, Leader, that a big bus and a small number of minibus contracts have been procured successfully via another procurement exercise. The tender comprised of a schedule of 154 separate routes that will expire at the end of the current academic year. The routes were tendered by the corporate procurement team utilising open competition advertising. Unfortunately, technical issues with the South Wales site, coupled with recent changes to the operational guidance schools have had, an impact on the routes and also on the capacity of vehicles required to deliver the service. This would have required a substantial material change to the budget invitation to tender, and therefore the local authority has found it necessary to stop the procurement exercise prior to the deadlines of tender submissions. The local authority has intended to award contracts in August 21 in readiness for the start of the autumn term in September 21. However, the procurement has not been able to be progressed as intended, and is now insufficient time between now and the start of the autumn term to repeat the procurement exercise. Therefore, we need to establish alternative arrangements to ensure there's sufficient time to address the technical issues that impacted upon the current procurement exercise. We also need to take stock of the expected changes in national guidance as a result of the pandemic, which is currently impacting on home to school transport. This will allow officers sufficient time during autumn term to engage the market again through another procurement exercise with a view of having new contracts in place from January 2022. The current value of the contracts required to provide transport for the autumn term of the forthcoming school year is estimated at 1.07 million. However, by direct award of new contracts, there may be some positive and negative variation in the rates currently charged to the local authority by contractors through to the end of this calendar year. Therefore, at this time, it's difficult to estimate the current cost of the proposal until the market has been engaged. While the costs of these contracts will be met by existing budgets, you'll be aware, Leader, that the home to school transport budget is a challenging one. Therefore, Leader, I take to the recommendations at paragraph 9, specifically in that Cabinet is recommended to suspend the relevant parts of the CPRs, to authorise officers to identify suitable operators for each route, and authorise me as just statutory officer to enter into contracts with transport operators for the autumn term. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much for that report, Lindsay. I'll bring Councillor Smith in and then Councillor Patel. Councillor Smith, please.
Very briefly, Leader, I think the report and Lindsay's support of it explain the rationale for this proposal very well, and I move that we accept the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith, and then Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Lindsay. I just wanted to ask, what is the alternative if we do not accept your recommendations in this today? What position would we find ourselves in?
If we were to progress with the procurement of the transport now, and we couldn't get them in place by the start of the school term, we'd be failing to meet our statutory duty to transport learners back for schools. So it'd be a significant risk to the local authority if we didn't do it.
So basically, children wouldn't get to school if we didn't. There's a risk that children wouldn't get to school if we didn't agree to this. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, then I'm happy to second the recommendations. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Patel. And none of us, when we were writing these contracts, could have ever, in our worst nightmares, anticipate that we would be in a global health pandemic, which is still having an impact to this day on the operational guidance and requirements for learner travel, and therefore it is necessary for us to make decisions like the decisions that have been recommended to us by statutory officers today. Of course, once we have more stability and clarity around operational guidance, then we'll be able to we'll be able to make sure that we award the contracts in strict accordance with the contract procedure rules. But the rules also allow exemptions to be made, don't they? And clearly there are very compelling reasons why we are making that decision today. So is everyone in agreement with that? Yeah. Thank you, colleagues, and that is the penultimate report. We now have information reports for noting. No, we don't. I have skipped a report. I'm far too enthusiastic. We have a report on human resources policies, and that will be presented by the Chief Officer for Legal, HR and Regulatory Services. Kelly, please.
Leader, Deborah's here today. Deborah's going to present these reports for you. Deborah Beek, the Group Manager for HR and Organisational Development. Well,
a very warm welcome to Deborah, who I think is lucky enough to have some sort of electrical or mechanical fan. So you're very sensible, and I wish I had one as well, Deborah. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. As you indicated, the report today is about HR policies, and it is important for the Council to have a set of HR policies which comply with employment legislation based on good practice and also reflect the organisation's culture. The report outlines the reviews that have now been completed on our disclosure and bar in service policy, dignity at work and grievance. Policy review is an important area within HR, which involves full consultation with our trade union colleagues. Taking you to paragraph 4, we pick up first the disclosure and barring policy.
This is a lengthy document and outlines the arrangements in place, policy and procedure-wise, for criminal record check-in and the council's obligations with regard to this for employment purposes, but also in certain service areas where the requirement for criminal record check-in is actually a statutory requirement. Having a DBS policy assists the council to meet our safeguarding requirements and therefore to undertake safe recruitment. So this policy is sits alongside our recruitment policy and safeguarding policy, which has recently been approved. So as outlined in paragraph 4.3, the policy itself is contained in Appendix 1. And some of the main changes in there are about ensuring that the policy reflects current legislation and operational arrangements. So things such as the UK GDPR legislation, our fair processing statements, and the fact that we have an electronic application system. So moving on to paragraph 4.4, we look at the resolution policy. This policy, when under review, the grievance and dignity at work policies, whilst under review, decision was made that these two policies should come together and form a resolution policy. The policy allows employees to raise concerns as well as dignity at work issues, and issues that may fall into that category could but are not limited to the applications of terms and conditions of employment, application of HR policies, working relationships, health and safety matters, equal opportunities, bullying and harassment. The aims of the policy are to deal with matters ideally in an informal setting, but to achieve as early resolution as possible. This policy is one where we've worked very closely with managers and trade union colleagues. Whilst we always consult with trade union colleagues on policies, we actually sat down with experienced managers and trade union colleagues to work through the former policies that were in place. And this is a process that the trade unions have very much welcomed. They were happy to hear comments and views from managers, because normally they are in formal arenas when they are going through these procedures. So I think it was a healthy process, and one in which they've commended and are welcoming working in this way going forward. So in paragraph 4.6 outlines that the policy itself is in Appendix 2 and also promotes the use of facilitated discussions, again, as I mentioned, in order to reach early resolution. So taking you to the recommendation is to approve these both policies, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for that very helpful overview of these policies. I'll bring the deputy leader in now, please, Councillor Williams.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to move the recommendation at 9.1. And I'd like to give my thanks to Deb and the team for the work she've put into this. Obviously, the consultation with the unions was very important in this. It's not a sensational piece of work. It's something we would do anyway, you know, to update our policies from time to time to keep up to date with current legislative changes. So you know, it's a no nonsense policy. What you see is what you get. And, you know, good work. Happy to support.
Yeah, thanks so much, Deputy Leader. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patel. Deputy Leader, is that a new hand or a legacy hand? Okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded. I'm particularly pleased that we've worked closely with our trade union colleagues on the refresh of these policies, and that they reflect the latest legislation and regulatory changes. And it's timely the resolutions policy, because we're very mindful at the moment about the well-being of our staff, and there's a range of measures we're putting in place and have put in place to make sure that particularly staff who have now effectively working remotely, working from home, that they're more effectively supported. And I wanted to thank in particular colleagues in HR for the work that they've done over the last 15 or 16 months. It's all behind the scenes, it's all unsung, but it's certainly appreciated by the frontline services, because without HR, without finance, without legal, then we wouldn't be able to deliver any of the services that we deliver. And we know that you've been as busy as everyone else has been, but it is appreciated. So thank you very much, Deborah, and please pass on our thanks to the to our colleagues in that service, and to our trade union colleagues as well. Is everyone in agreement with the policies, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Deborah. Good to see you, and stay cool. Next report is information reports for noting, and that is a report of the Chief Officer, Legal, HR and Regulatory Services. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Kelly Watson, Chief Officer, Legal, Regulatory and HR. This is just a very brief administrative report, the purpose of which is to inform Cabinet of the information reports which have been published since your last meeting. At paragraph 4.1, you'll find the detail of those reports, and as always, they have been circulated to all elected members and published on the Bridgend website. I would just ask members to note that those reports have been published. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Can I have someone move that those reports have been published? I assume you haven't had any questions about those reports, Kelly? None at all, is it? Okay.
Happy to move.
Someone second?
Second.
Thank you. Everyone in agreement? We note the reports?
Agreed.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. That's information reports for noting. I don't have any urgent items that, by reason of special circumstances, we consider at today's meeting in accordance with the Constitution, and therefore I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for